Welcome back, Holotable Heroes, to another Galaxy of Heroes video. I'm your boy Scribble, and I can already see the thoughts in your head. You're thinking, gee, Scribble, you look mighty dashing in a shirt. And I'll have to say yes. Yes, I do. Thank you. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the order in which you should be farming your Galactic Legends. In a game such as Galaxy of Heroes, we all know that roster development is of paramount importance if you want to succeed. And today, we will go through and discuss in detail why you should be farming these GLs in this order, and why I did it wrong. Let's break this down.
So give it up.
My dead body.
It's very easy, I think, in this game to just look at a thing like all the Galactic Legends that currently exist in the game and just say, hey, JMK claps cheeks, let's get him. You gotta think of so many different things when it comes to what is the best Galactic Legend, and honestly, there isn't going to be a list here that's going to encompass every single person's best first GL or what order you should farm your GLs in. I just want to put out my opinion on which order you should be thinking about taking your GLs in order to progress in a cost-efficient manner. We need to think about more than just what's required and what do you get out of it. We also have to think about what are the ancillary benefits, what are the current situation of your roster, and just how much are you either willing to spend or how much have you already invested in other areas of the game. Also, it depends which game modes you prefer. However, I like to think that we can at least take a stab at deciding on which GLs are better than others. So, without further ado, in my opinion, the first GL almost anybody should farm without question is...
I sense unease about my appearance.
That's right, our boy Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren remains to this day as the most efficient and best value first GL that any account can actually get. There are a number of reasons why this is the case, and yes, this is also why I did things wrong. I have 6 out of the 7 GLs, and Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is the only one I don't have.
Bruh.
Let's break this down. Why is Supreme Leader Kylo Ren so very valuable, especially for an early game account? The benefit really breaks down to it uses older characters. As one of the earliest GLs, if not technically the earliest GL alongside Rey, the characters that are used to farm this particular Galactic Legend all require accelerated farmed characters. Every single unit here is on accelerated farm, so you can gain the shards incredibly quickly. But not only that, the relic requirements you need in order to unlock this character are lower than what can typically be found compared to the likes of JML, JMK, Lord Vader, etc, etc. So not only are you able to farm the shards very quickly, but you're also able to farm the relic levels at a relatively good pace. So the ease of access is quite available there. The second step that we have to consider here is the characters that you use to actually unlock Supreme Leader Kylo Ren are actually useful in using him in actual application. A number of other GLs have their requirements not actually feature within their optimal team. You look at the units like Rey. Rey certainly does not use resistance characters for the most part in some of her optimal lineups. C, for example, needs the addition of Watt and nobody else. Lord Vader still needs additional requirements in many additional Sith units or Empire units that don't feature as part of his farm. Jedi Master Luke needs the likes of Gas, needs the likes of Jedi Knight Revan, also has a bunch of other characters that you need to farm for him. Jabba is a bit of an outlier in that you need most of the characters in his requirements will simply just jump into his team. But Supreme Leader Kylo Ren can simply be used with the units that you actually have to unlock him with. You're using the likes of Hux, you're using the likes of Crew, you're using the likes of Sith Trooper, etc, etc, and you will have a perfectly viable unit straight out of the gate when you've unlocked him. Granted, he might not be incredibly useful before you get his ultimate, but it is still a usable team. Not only that, but the leftovers that you actually farm in order to unlock this character actually are very beneficial in both GAC and Territory War, especially with the additions of more recently introduced Omicrons. You can see that Phasma has got some use with her Phasma TW Omicron. TIE Fighter Pilot has also got some additional use within his Omicron for GAC. When we look at this in a PvP environment, outside of that, we can see that Supreme Leader Kylo Ren remains incredibly viable to this day. He is a very reliable counter to most GLs. He takes out the likes of Jabba with relative ease, which is a very useful commodity to have. Granted, he's not necessarily a GL you would use for defense, but not every GL has to be a defensive team. He can still work there though. When we look wider than that again, we also know that the Finalizer fleet is also an incredibly valuable fleet to have. It might not particularly fit within the confines of TB and be used in the latest Rise of the Empire territory battles. However, on offense, the Finalizer has got its spot, especially if you are looking to place your more meta or more recent fleets on defense for GAC, saving things like Empire, Finalizer, and potentially even the Malevolence for offense means that you can throw things like Profundity, Executor, and maybe even the Negotiator on defense. It gives you that extra flexibility, and it's all encompassed in one relatively easy farm compared to the other GLs. So, who do we think should be your second GL?
Look what you have made.
Coming in at number 2, that's right, it's Papa Palpatine. I appreciate I will likely get a little bit of pushback on this particular ranking. C has always been a little bit lackluster when compared to many GLs, and the reason for that is because he just doesn't seem to have a solid team or a solid fit within the meta. However, offensively speaking, this Galactic Legend is incredibly valuable. He is a literal toolbox that you can whip out to take down any number of teams. A number of GLs fall to this guy, but more importantly, a number of the trickier A+ tier teams that you see on defense that have very difficult counters are handled by C, and using C with just Wat as a supporting character. Of course, I understand the issue with that is that Trench has come to the game now and is likely going to be stealing Wat for the foreseeable future, at least in territory war game modes. However, C does have other applications elsewhere. You can throw him in with a smorgasbord. That's right, we got the word smorgasbord into this particular video. A smorgasbord of other characters in order to take down particular GLs. He can still take down the likes of JML. He can still take down the likes of JMK. Yes, you have to throw in things like Thrawn, and yes, you have to use things like Armorer and potentially Geo-Brood Alpha to make it work, but it can still have that use and get that viability. Now, apart from the fact that he's very incredibly useful on offense, he also has an incredibly easy farm. When we take a look at the units that are required for this character, it is so much easier compared to other GLs. Let's actually get to the right page now, Scribble. So, Palpatine, Vader, Royal Guard, Piet, Krennic. Apart from Piet, these are all incredibly old characters that many people will have geared up, but not only that, there is a resurgence within the Empire faction in this game, and they actually clap cheeks. That's right, Palpatine with the likes of Mara Jade, Darth Vader, throwing in Starkiller, they're all very useful characters to have, and they translate into use across TB as well in Rise of the Empire. Also, the relic levels, very, very generous, very, very low. Couple of 7s, some 3s, 5s, and 4s. Yes, okay, maybe not all of the characters are top tier, incredibly useful characters, High Sidious, but we do have some use out of most of these guys. Sith Marauder over here is still very valuable, not only because he can fit into a Malak or a Malgus Darth Revan setup for your Sith Empire, but he also has a very useful Sith fleet ship that is probably going to find some additional use in the very near future if the rumours are to be believed that we are going to be getting the Ravager capital ship in the near future. The Imperial TIE Bomber, also an incredibly valuable ship. Jedi Knight Anakin fits into a Padme team, fits into a Qui-Gon Jinn Omicron team as well. Thrawn, Moff Tarkin's fleet, incredibly valuable. Veers, Stark, Imperial Troopers with Piet, Dark Trooper, throw them all in and you have got some fantastic teams. Granted, they don't necessarily work with C, but that's not the point. The point is the requirements are low, they are usable, and you can rush to get him. Not only that, excuse me, how dare people knock on my door when I'm recording a video? How rude. As I was saying, Not only are his requirements very easy, but it also fits very nicely in with the Executor farm. There is a number of shared crossover units here, and you can go from one to the other very quickly. So personally, I actually think that if you are doing an Executor rush as an early game account, you're probably better served going for C as your first GL compared to Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. That way you will have a meta fleet and you will have a GL to use on offense in a relatively short amount of time. It will also give you good bounty hunters as well as a good foot up in getting very effective Imperial troopers on the board. And then maybe after that, go for Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. And just one final thing to say about fleet when it comes to Sith Eternal Emperor. Oh yes, Papa Palpatine, you're so beautiful. Is that there has been a massive resurgence in the Empire fleet with the introduction of the TIE Interceptor and the TIE Defender. The Empire fleet is now able to punch up incredibly well and take out the likes of Executor and take out the likes of Profundity for very good banners. This fleet is now top tier. Not something necessarily I would put on defense, but offensively speaking, it is an absolute powerhouse. This has breathed a little bit of additional life into the C farm. Number 3 though. That's right, Jabba the Hutt, the latest and greatest galactic legend to bless the holotables, is my third choice. And I know this might seem at odds a little bit with what I've been preaching for the rest of this video, in that you should be looking to go for farms that offer good value as soon as you invest in them. Jabba is obviously a newer character and has 3 new marquees that are not yet accelerated farms. However, if you do double refresh on these nodes for each of these characters, you can expect to have them finished up in around about a 3-month period, which is probably about the time you will need in order to build up the gears and the relic signal data and materials in order to hit the requirements. Now, why is Jabba so useful? Now, typically speaking, when we talk about CG and the development of the meta, usually new things better than old things, and that is usually the case. Jabba, I wouldn't go so far as to say he is hands down the strongest GL. I still think, in an all situations being equal thing, that JMK with Commander Ahsoka Tano probably holds the cake in that respect. However, Jabba has got some additional use that JMK does not quite bring to the table. If we were to look at Rise of the Empire TB, which again, latest bit of content from CG, very, very useful. Jabba has got dedicated nodes within the mixed path that you simply have to have him in order to participate and then gain additional rewards for your guild. So if TB is important to you and your guild, it should be, then you need to make sure that you try and prioritize Jabba just a little bit. Offensively speaking, in Territory Wars and Grand Arena, he is able to take down a number of the GLs with relative ease, and he does not necessarily even need to have his ult in order to achieve that. Obviously, still get his ult. When the rule of cool comes into play, what's bad about having a Rancor eat a character on the field? I'm only halfway to the ult, I need that Rancor. More importantly, if he applies very well within TB and within a PvP element of TW and GAC, there are obviously no downsides to him. We also have to consider that we are about to have some more information relating to the Krayt Dragon raid, the brand new raid coming to the game with hitherto unannounced new tiers of rewards, Relic 10. And he is one of the few factions, Hutt Cartel, that are actually going to be able to be used within that raid. This is going to, I can't quantify exactly how important this is, but I'm going to guess that it will be very important to have the only GL that you can use in that raid in your roster. If you really want to be getting those new rewards, I can expect that the changes to the raid system and the new Krayt Dragon raid are going to have pivotal, very important rewards, if not to get Relic 10, then to certainly develop your roster faster compared to your peers. So, we know that he's good in PvP, we know that he is good in TB. Other units have got good things for fleet. Does Jabba have the same principle? Well, not really, unfortunately. One of his requirements is the Outrider, and you do have Han Solo at Relic 8. They both fit within the Profundity fleet, but outside of that, it's not a whole lot that really lends itself to good fleets at this point. Boba Fett is already a requirement for the Executor, so there's a little bit of crossover there, but nothing really here screams, I'm good for fleet. Not just yet anyway. Maybe in the future we will. His requirements, whilst high, are not egregious, and overall the characters that you get for him outside of the units that you would typically use for him, they're just not phenomenal. They're not bad, but they're not amazing. Overall, I'd call Jabba a very useful and incredibly pivotal GL to have in your roster, just not one I would go for as a first GL.
Hello there.
Jedi Master Kenobi is without a doubt the GL that I would put next. The only reason I don't place General Kenobi higher than many other GLs in this list is simply because he does not operate effectively without Commander Ahsoka Tano. And if you are in a position where you are farming for your very first GL, it is incredibly likely that you do not have Commander Ahsoka Tano in your roster. However, if you are one of those people that does have Commander Ahsoka Tano, get Jedi Master Kenobi. He is literally that good. When it comes to every single area of the game, he performs admirably. He is able to solo the heroic Sith raid. He is able to go 4 out of 4 or 2 out of 2 in the Rise of the Empire TB, and he is able to handedly deal with every GL on the holotables. Perhaps some easier than others, but otherwise he is both incredibly valuable in every single game mode and also highly efficient. His only real downside is the fact that if you do not have Commander Ahsoka Tano with him, he is not as good as the other GLs. It is simply a case of you must have his lifter unit, otherwise he is not valuable. And I appreciate that these days, with Proving Grounds the way it is very expensive and very timely to try and get Commander Ahsoka Tano. If it weren't for those two factors, I would place him much, much higher. When we look at his requirements, we can see that they are quite difficult. We do have a Relic 8, and then we've got a couple of Relic 3s, 5s, and 7s. And the units that you use for him or use to unlock for him are not phenomenal in a lot of cases. We can see that we do have stuff like Negotiator as easy low-hanging fruit, but Mace Windu, Aayla Secura, Bo-Katan, these characters, whilst they do have their place inside the game, they are not exactly top-tier characters. Going further on, we've got the likes of Qui-Gon Jinn, very useful for a Qui-Gon Jinn Omicron team in GAC, if a little bit dated and understood now. Magna Guard fits well with GG. You also have General Grievous as one of the requirements, and these are quite generous, I feel, because these are characters that people would like to gear up anyway, either for their separatist teams to unlock gas, for their separatist fleets, for example, or to just use in GAC themselves. Wat Tambor, whilst a fantastic unit, 4 newer characters is another roadblock because he is not the easiest character to farm quickly. If you are in a guild that is doing particularly well in Darkside Geo, but don't have Wat Tambor unlocked yet, you might find yourself a little bit at odds if you're coming to the game into a bigger guild that is potentially running Rise of the Empire instead of Darkside Geonosis. Yes, you still have other options to farm Wat Tambor, but they will be either prohibitively expensive or using materials that you don't particularly want to use, so it could be a bit of a stumbling block for many players. Looking further on, you can see that we've got Cad Bane and Jango Shakti, Grandmaster Yoda, and Cody. So some good units, and some units that still don't really have their place in the game. The benefit of this is, of course, it does give you a wide swath of characters that you can use elsewhere. When you think about the optimal team for Jedi Master Kenobi in a PvP environment, you obviously think of the likes of Gas, you think of the likes of General Kenobi, you think of the likes of Snips, right? You want to have those characters there, and some of them are requirements here, but Gas isn't one of them. Typically speaking, I wouldn't think you would be farming JMK before you'd unlocked Gas anyway. These are all reasons why I've pushed Jedi Master Kenobi further down the list, simply because the requirements are just a little bit heavy. Which leads us on to Jedi Master Luke is one of my absolute favourite Galactic Legends in the entire game, so I imagine you are asking yourself, why have I placed him so low down the priority order when it comes to farming GLs? And the answer is actually quite simple. His requirements are absurd. I'm not saying that he requires Relic 9 characters, but when you really delve into the amount of characters that you need to farm in order to unlock him, and then place additional investment into the team after you have unlocked him, the farm is a long and arduous one, particularly if you are a new player to the game. So we have to think about, what are the requirements? Well, we can see Hermit Yoda over here, but if you are a new player, you're not necessarily going to have easy access to unlock Hermit Yoda. Get 1 currency doesn't exactly rain from the skies, especially with newer TBs being released, so you get fewer Get 1 currency than we would historically get. You also need to get the likes of Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, which requires things like Wampa, another Get 1 character, Rolo, Captain Han. These are all characters that are not necessarily the top of people's priority list. Taking a look at other legends that we need in order to unlock Luke. We need Chewbacca, which means we need to have some decent investment in bounty hunters. We also need to get C-3PO, which means we need decent investment inside your Ewoks, at least sort of gear 9. Probably more investment in your Ewoks if you don't want to die an early death due to high blood pressure and stress. So whilst he is a phenomenal unit with a lot of application across the game, his requirements take a lot of time to get. And I can't understate that. Older players are easily forgetting how long these farms take. I remember when he came out, I had already finished the Jedi Knight Luke farm. I was already most of the way to Jedi Master Kenobi. Jedi Master Luke, apologies. So it's easy for us to think, oh yes, it's not a bad farm, doesn't require that many high relics, but it's simply not the case. Also, once you have unlocked him, he only really comes into his own when you hit Relic 9, and Relic 9 is a steep height to hit. It takes a lot of investment to try and build up to Relic 9, especially if you're not in a guild that is doing the Crankle, is getting good results in TW, and is getting good results in TB as well. Before that, you're likely going to be looking to use characters like Jedi Knight Revan and Wat Tambor with Jedi Knight Luke and Gas. These are all characters. Jedi Knight Luke, sure, is part of the farm, but Gas and Jedi Knight Revan, Wat Tambor, these are all additional obstacles that are in your path until you can get his ultimate and until you can get him up to Relic 9 with a boatload of protection to start really getting the most use out of his ultimate and his lead. So what else? How does he perform in the PvP and PvE environments? Well, in PvP, he can take down most of the GLs. He has a pretty good record at taking them down if we take out things like Datacrons from the ecosystem. He does relatively okay there. There are a number that he struggles with, but overall a worthwhile toolbox to have in your inventory. When it comes to non-GL counters, he's pretty dependable to take out more or less anything you will come across and do so with very good banners. If we look at TB, he offers the opportunity to get good results in Rise of the Empire and certainly in Lightside GOTB. Hoth, he will absolutely destroy it in. Conquest, however, is where he really comes into his own. He is such a valuable unit to have for Conquest because he will help you get other feats that might seem otherwise awkward to get. As long as you have some Jedi on your team and a light side unit, you are able to circumvent killing certain faction, getting kills with certain factions, because you can call them in with his coin ability and do significant damage to farm kills and abilities that way. So Conquest offers an additional area of benefit for this particular GL. However, we've still got some GLs to go.
You underestimate my power!
Much like Jedi Master Luke, Lord Vader unfortunately just has prohibitively difficult relic and investment requirements. His usability across the game is actually very good. He has gone up and down like an absolute yo-yo when it comes to his competitiveness in a PvP aspect, thanks to the introduction of Datacrons. He was either the most irritating thing since things that were irritating never were created, or he was, generally speaking, not that good. He has gone from being practically unkillable to being beaten by Imperial troopers or bounty hunters on a regular basis. However, don't let that deter you. Lord Vader is actually a very good character, and unlike JMK, he still holds a certain level of viability without his lifter unit, Maul. However, due to the strictness of the requirements and the fact that Maul does elevate him but isn't an actual requirement, I've placed his priority a little bit lower. When we take a look at his actual requirements here, we can see that he needs much of the Bad Batch at Relic 5, and unfortunately they are massive Chirotech hogs. You need swathes of Chirotech. I think it's upwards of 2,000 Chirotech in total just for the Bad Batch alone, and whilst they are fantastic as a team and have great viability in both PvE and PvP environments, it is a significant grind when you're looking to get Lord Vader. Not only that, compared to every other GL in the game, he has the highest number of relic levels required. We've got nothing below Relic 5, we've got a Relic 8, we've got another Relic 8, and 2 more Relic 8s, and a bunch of Relic 7s. Now don't get me wrong, there is an element of crossover here. Grand Moff Tarkin, for example, crosses over with, I believe, the Sea Farm. You've got Embo, which will be useful for Jabba the Hutt. You've got Count Dooku, which is also crossing over with the Sea Farm. So it's not like the requirements aren't useful, they are actually very good, but you will find yourself hating life whilst you try to farm all of the materials that you need to crunch down into signal data and to crunch down into relic gear. And then when you eventually get him in a PvP environment, like I said, he's useful. Yes, he is good. He has his viability. But it's not like he dominates everything that he goes into. He has his use, he has his place in the meta, but it's just sort of okay, which is why I like to place the priority elsewhere. Now, when you look at PvE environments, that's where he gets a little bit more sway going. In Conquest, fantastic, go in, hit auto, and win. You can drain down his stamina quite significantly even on hard mode Conquest, given the right scenarios. In addition, when you look at Rise of the Empire, he has his own dedicated node, for example, in Phase 1, and generally speaking, he holds his viability throughout the phases. I can't speak for late Rise of the Empire because I'm not there. But yes, he is a character that has viability. The other problem with him as a team is that in order to really gain the most use out of him and to really flex and lean into the mastery benefits that he gains, you need not only high levels of relic investments in him, we are talking Relic 9 here, but also in his supporting units. Things like Royal Guard, which is a requirement at, I believe, Relic 5 for C. I don't know if he's actually a requirement here. Allow me to check. No. Royal Guard, for example, is not in the requirements for Lord Vader, but it's absolutely necessary to use him, and you really want him to be at least Relic 7. And then if you want to start throwing in additional units like Maul, you want to take him to at least Relic 7. Any additional units, like if you're using Piet, then great, but typically, in most scenarios, you won't be dragging Piet away from Imperial troopers, so you need additional Empire or unaligned Darkside Force users in order to prop him up. And the higher their relic levels, the more mastery that he will be siphoning off, so that he will eventually ramp to do obscene levels of damage. He's a good character, he is. It's just expensive. And of course, that leaves us with just one character left. And of course, finally, we have Rey. Rey, I know I've put her at the bottom of the list, and I also know that Rey was the very first GL that I got, and I don't regret that decision. However, it would be remiss of me to say that you should be farming her early. You simply shouldn't. If you are going to go for an early GL, you are better off going for Supreme Leader Kylo Ren or Sith Eternal Emperor, because they are able to do everything that Rey does, mostly, only better. You get more for it, you know? Let's take a look at the requirements. So, Rey Jedi Training, Finn Resistance Trooper, Scavenger Rey Resistance Pilot, Poe Dameron, Bag Bros, Rose Tico, BB-8. The big problem is the requirements are just not that good, and Rey typically doesn't even use these requirements. They are getting a little bit of additional viability these days thanks to the introduction of Zori Bliss. You know, making Rose Tico's Omicron actually useful in conjunction with Zori Bliss and the Datacron. But the fleet that you get, the Radis fleet, is basically just god-awful trash. It's terrible. It's a fleet that is only really good reserved for cleanups. Yes, it can potentially do some things, it can potentially beat certain fleets, but typically it is incredibly banner inefficient, not good on defense, and just does not. If it gets to the point where you need to use the Radus in a Grand Arena, you have probably already lost at that point. And even with the introduction, if you compare the development, the evolution of the Rey Resistance Squad and the Supreme Leader Kylo Finalizer First Order ecosystem, they've gone in opposite directions. Rey started off superior, just in objective terms, to Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. She was the better GL. And then CG saw that Supreme Leader Kylo Ren was struggling a little bit, so they buffed him. And then they buffed him again, and then they buffed him again. They haven't touched Rey's kit since it was introduced. It hasn't changed at all. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren got buffed 3 times. Then compare the Finalizer and the Radus fleet. The Finalizer was infinitely better than the Radus fleet from the get-go. And then they brought in the lifter units of the Echelon for the Finalizer. All of a sudden, the Finalizer is taking out Executor. Easily wipes the floor with Negotiator, Malevolence, no problem. And they bring out the SF-17 for the Holdo fleet. The Resistance fleet all of a sudden still doesn't do anything. It's still terrible. Does CG just hate the Resistance faction? I feel like they do. Honestly. The SF-17 did nothing for the fleet. Did nothing. It still doesn't take out anything, which I'm a little bit triggered by the fact that the Resistance fleet is terrible, okay? But let's take it away. We can't boil down a GL just to how their fleet is, okay? So how does Rey perform in PvE and PvP? In PvP, phenomenal. She is incredible. She is able to beat down GLs, and defensively speaking, she has always been a stalwart. If you underestimate a Rey team on defense, you will pay for it. Moreover, with the introduction of the likes of Zori Bliss and the introduction of the likes of Ben Solo and the introduction of Cal Kestis, she is having new life breathed into her team. She is able to do more and better things as time progresses, and I'm hoping that that continues to be the case. I really do. In GAC 3v3, she has long been a very difficult thorn in most people's sides. So PvP, she absolutely can be very, very valuable, both offensively and defensively. When we look at Rise of the Empire TB and we look at the likes of Lightside Geonosis, she absolutely crushes it. She can go through and get wave after wave. You have to play her right in Rise of the Empire TB and even in Geonosian TB, but when you do, the results are phenomenal. When you look at her viability in Conquest as well, she is a GL. She has use, oftentimes has use in elevating that team and getting certain feats that can be otherwise more difficult to achieve. Things like thermal detonator feats, things like damage immunity feats, and being able to protect weaker units that you need to stay alive. So she is absolutely valuable, and I don't want you to see this at the end of the list and think, God, Rey is worthless, don't get her. There is no such thing as a bad GL. The requirements are not that great. I can't in good conscience tell anybody to go out there and farm Rey quickly. Unfortunately, it's a big sad. I think that's going to about do it for today's video though, guys. I hope it was useful to you. I found it enlightening myself to go through this process. Please do take a moment and like this video and consider subscribing to your boy Scribe. And until the next video, peace out and may the Force be with you.